I paid for my daughter's wedding, but she told her friends I was just the planner. I was standing right there, not more than 10 feet away, when Lauren said it. She's just helping out with the logistics, she told the woman in pearls. An old planner my mom used once. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked past me like I was part of the table setting, tasteful, necessary, and invisible. The woman in pearls nodded, smiled at me like you do when someone hands you a napkin. "Oh, how lovely," she said. Everything looked so seamless. I smiled too. Seamless. That was the word Lauren had used when she first showed me the venue, an oceanside resort in La Jolla, with cliffs like carved marble and table linens more expensive than my first car. "I want it to feel effortless," she'd said, "like something out of a magazine." I said, "Of course." I always said, "Of course." That was 6 months ago when I wired the initial deposit. $30,000 to start, and then another $20,000 2 weeks later. Lauren didn't ask directly. She never did. She'd just call after dinner, voice a little trembly, and say things like, "The caterer wants payment in full to lock the date," or "Travis's parents are paying for the rehearsal dinner, so I don't want them thinking we're short." And so I paid. I paid for the flowers, the champagne tower, the 5-tier cake from that bakery in San Diego everyone on Pinterest seems to worship. I paid for the custom signage, the dance floor lighting the signature cocktails with embossed glass stirrers. I even paid for the ice sculptures. I didn't blink. I didn't negotiate. I just said yes. And then I said thank you to the bank teller who confirmed each transfer. Because that's what mothers do, right? They give. Even when they're not asked by name, even when they're erased softly with the kind of precision that only family can manage. I don't think Lauren meant to hurt me, not at first. She was just building a version of her life that fit neatly into her new world. And maybe I didn't match the decor. Maybe a retired event planner from Napa with calloused hands and practical shoes didn't belong in the narrative she was crafting with Travis, whose mother wore cashmere and never once picked up her own glass. Still, it stung. God, it stung. Standing there in the soft lighting of the welcome party, with my name misspelled on a chalkboard sign near the bar, Eleanor W. Support Lead, I felt something inside me tip, not break, not yet. Just tip. Like a chair you've sat on for too long, slowly leaning off balance. You don't fall, but you know the ground is coming. I didn't say anything that night. Not to Lauren. Not to Travis. Not to the woman in pearls who complimented the wine I'd chosen, but never once looked me in the eye. I just kept adjusting the centerpieces. White roses, pale ranunculus, dusty eucalyptus. The kind of arrangement you pay $400 a table for, when what you really want is to feel like you belong in someone's photo album. It's a strange kind of loneliness being surrounded by people and still feeling like furniture. When I got back to the little rental suite Lauren had booked for me, a quiet spot, for you to relax, she'd said, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my suitcase. I hadn't even unpacked. The closet had wire hangers and the bedside lamp flickered every time I reached to turn it off. It wasn't about the room. It was about what it signified. This wasn't my place in her life anymore. This wasn't the room for the mother of the bride. It was the room for someone useful, but peripheral, temporary, a placeholder. When my husband died, Lauren was 27. She cried so hard at the funeral, I thought she'd break in half. Afterward, she stayed at my house for a month, sleeping in her old bed, curled into the covers like a child. I made her toast and herbal tea every morning, even when I could barely stand. And when her first marriage fell apart a few years later, she called me at midnight, sobbing into the phone. "Mom, I don't know who I am anymore." And I said, "You're mine. That's who you are. You'll find the rest later." Now, here we were. Years later, thousands of dollars later, and I was a vendor. Not even that, really. Vendors get recognition. Vendors get seats with their names on little cards. I got a clipboard and a hotel key card and instructions to stay flexible. People think getting older means you stop needing to be seen. They're wrong. The older I get, the more invisible I become, not because I fade, but because everyone around me stops looking. They assume I've had my turn, that I've served my function, that I've become function. No one asks how I feel anymore. They ask what I can do. Can I bring the linens? Can I confirm the head count? Can I please not mention to anyone that I'm footing the bill? Because that's not the story they're telling. They want origin stories that sparkle, not ones that smell like hand-rolled pie crusts and second mortgages. That night, I lay in bed, fully dressed hands folded over my stomach, and I thought, so this is how it starts. The quiet erasure. Not by accident, not with malice, but with practiced ease, with smiles and seating charts, with a new last name on the programs and an old mother left out of the narrative. And the cruelest part, they think they're being kind. I arrived at the venue 2 hours early on the morning of the bridal luncheon. Not because I had to, but because I needed a place to sit where no one asked why I was there. The space was admittedly stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows, silk drapes the color of rosé gold-rimmed charger plates at every seat. You could practically smell the money baked into the air, a blend of tuberose citrus and control. Lauren had gone with a subtle vineyard elegance theme. She said that phrase to the florist like she'd invented it. I remember because I was holding her phone during the consultation while she sipped a 19-liter green juice and Travis scrolled through images of Tuscan weddings he'd found on Instagram. Now, as I smoothed the hem of my dress, not designer but tasteful, I watched the catering staff light floating candles in tall glass vases. Each vase, I later learned, cost $70 to rent. For water and flame, no one greeted me by name, no one offered me coffee. I found a seat near the back where I could keep an eye on things. That's what I was told after all. Just help us keep an eye on the details, Mom. Just. That word again. Sometimes I think just is the most dangerous word in the English language. It shrinks everything it touches. You're not my mother who paid for this wedding, you're just helping out. You're not the woman who raised me, you're just managing logistics. You're not seen, you're just there. The makeup artist floated past me in a cloud of expensive perfume, whispering to her assistant that Lauren's cheekbones photographed like a Kennedy. Someone else joked that Lauren could be on the cover of Town and Country if she played her cards right. I wanted to say she got those cheekbones from me, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled out the tiny leather-bound devotional I keep in my purse. It's the one my mother gave me when I turned 40 back, when Lauren still thought I was magic, and God still felt close. I ran my thumb along the edge until I found the page with the yellow ribbon. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I whispered it to myself more out of muscle memory than faith. Somewhere between the blessing and the coffee station, a new kind of ache bloomed in me. Not sharp, not even new really, more like something old stretching its legs after a long nap. The ache of watching your child become someone you don't recognize and realizing they still carry your eyes. Later that day, Lauren's soon-to-be stepmother Clarissa arrived in a cream linen suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She gave me a perfectly polite nod and then turned to the photographer. "Make sure to get a few of me and Lauren together," she said. Candid, but warm. He nodded, already adjusting his lens. No one asked me for a photo. That night, I returned to the rental suite alone. The concierge, a boy who looked barely old enough to drive, asked if I was enjoying my stay. "Lovely," I said, and smiled, because women my age are expected to be gracious above all else. There was a bottle of champagne chilling on the counter, a gift from Lauren and Travis addressed to Ms. Whitman. "Thank you for your support." It wasn't signed love, not even with appreciation. Just that one word support, like a pillar, like a beam in a ballroom ceiling, like something meant to hold weight without being seen. I poured a glass, even though champagne gives me a headache, and I sat by the window in silence. Outside, the city glittered expensive, untouchable. I could see the ocean from the edge of the balcony. At that distance, it looked like a still painting. Beautiful. Distant. Unforgiving. That was how Lauren's world felt now. Curated. Controlled. And very, very far from the one I used to rock her to sleep in. I thought of the first wedding dress we ever picked out together back when she was 23 and swore she wanted something simple, like lace and sunlight. That marriage didn't last. But I remember how she stood in front of the mirror barefoot on the pedestal and whispered, "Do I look like a bride, Mama?" Now I watched her walk through the lobby of the venue flanked by a planner with a clipboard and a glam team that called her babe. She was glowing, yes, radiant even. But she never once looked back to see if I was watching. And I was. God help me, I was. At one point, I pulled up the spreadsheet on my phone, the one I kept to track expenses. Not because I needed to count, but because I needed to remember that I wasn't imagining things. $198, $640.27. That was the current total. That included the violin quartet for the ceremony, the imported linens from France, the personalized monogrammed silk napkins which I was later told might be discarded by guests anyway, but aesthetics over logic, right. I had given all of it. Quietly. Gladly even. Because mothers of daughters, especially only daughters, are trained to say yes and disappear behind the veil. But I was tired of disappearing. And something about that number, almost 200,000, felt biblical, like a tithe that had gone unpaid for generations. Except this time, it was my name that had been offered on the altar. My history, my identity sacrificed for the image. I sat in that chair until well past midnight, hands folded over my lap like I was waiting for a sermon. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was just waiting. For what I didn't know, a thank you, a real introduction, a moment where Lauren reached out and remembered whose hands had sown her childhood. Or maybe I was waiting for God to speak through the silence. He didn't, but I did hear the ice crack in the champagne bucket. A quiet shift. A fracture, small but inevitable. Something was changing. And this time, it was me. The morning after the bridal luncheon, I woke up before the sun. Not from a dream, not from any sound. Just from the kind of stillness that tells you something important has finally settled inside you, like sediment drifting to the bottom of a glass. I made coffee using the tiny hotel machine. It tasted like cardboard and regret. But I drank it anyway. Then I pulled out the old folder I kept in the front pocket of my suitcase, the one with all the contracts, receipts, and email threads from the past 7 months. It was a habit I'd learned from years in event planning, always keep a paper trail. At first, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe proof that I'd been here, that I hadn't dreamed this whole strange, humiliating week, that I hadn't imagined the way Lauren smiled for photographs with Clarissa while I bussed dessert plates in the background. But then somewhere near the bottom of the folder, I found the sponsorship agreement I had drawn up at the very beginning. Lauren had brushed it off at the time. "Oh, Mom, do we really need to be that formal?" She'd asked, her voice, half laugh, half guilt. "Yes," I said. "We do. Just so we're clear about expectations." She signed it the same day. Didn't read it, I think. She was distracted at cake tasting, or maybe a call with Travis about the seating chart. But I read it. Every line. I'd even had my friend Joanna, who used to work corporate legal at a winery, help me draft it. Now I read it again slowly. This time, not as the mother of the bride, but as the funder, the investor, the silent backbone. Clause 3B. The undersigned sponsor retains sole discretionary authority to approve or veto alterations in event design, guest structure, or programmatic inclusion that conflict with intent of original funding. Clause 4A. At sponsor's written request, any public materials referencing event support must reflect sponsor's name unless otherwise waived in writing. I sat back, stunned. Not because I'd forgotten those lines, but because I'd forgotten that I had the right to invoke them, that I had built a protection into this entire production, a quiet seatbelt for my own dignity. Lauren hadn't mentioned me in the program. She hadn't acknowledged me at the welcome dinner. She hadn't even included me on the wedding websites about our families page. Clarissa had a bio. Travis's dog had a bio. I did not. But this paper said otherwise. This paper, signed and dated and countersigned, said, I was not an accessory. I was not a donation. I was a principal stakeholder in the narrative they were polishing for the sake of appearances. And suddenly, I wasn't tired anymore. I was alert. Alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I went to the window, opened the curtain, and let the sharp California sunlight pour into the room like truth. Harsh, beautiful, unforgiving. I looked down at the streets below, sleek cars, trimmed hedges, a woman in leggings walking a dog the size of a throw pillow. This world ran on image, but it still obeyed paper. I turned back to the folder and took out a pen. No anger, no drama, just a steady hand. A note at the top of the document to be referenced if public exclusion continues. I folded it back into its sleeve and slipped it into my tote bag. It was time to remember who I was, not just to them, but to myself, and who I had been all along. By mid-morning, I was sitting at the little desk in my hotel room with my laptop open and my glasses perched on the tip of my nose. It had been years since I'd typed anything with real purpose. Most of my emails these days were grocery coupons and forwarded jokes from Margaret at church. But this was different. I opened the email thread from the planner. A perky young woman named Tessa, who referred to Lauren as my dream bride and ended every message with a pink digital signature that said, XXO, your wedding wing woman. I scrolled through dozens of updates, timelines, vendor confirmations, color palettes, RSVPs. Nowhere in any of them was I named. Not even CC'd on the final layout approval. But I had the invoices. I had the receipts. I had forwarded the payments myself. At the very start, Tessa had asked, "Would you like to be acknowledged as a co-host or sponsor?" On the materials I'd responded, "Not necessary. I just want her happy." I stared at those words for a long time. I just want her happy. It wasn't even a sentence. It was a surrender. But surrender doesn't have to be permanent. I clicked compose. Subject clarification. Regarding event materials. Urgent. Dear Tessa, I hope you're well and everything is running smoothly as we approach the big day. As the primary financial sponsor of this event, I wanted to make a small but important correction. I would appreciate it if my name, Eleanor Whitman, were listed appropriately on printed programs and acknowledgments as the event underwriter. Please also ensure that verbal recognition is made during any toasts or announcements as outlined in the original contract, attached again here for your reference. See clauses 3B and 4A. No need for fanfare, just factual accuracy. Thank you in advance for your understanding and discretion. Warmly, Eleanor Whitman. I read it twice, checking tone, checking clarity. Then I hit send. It didn't feel like power. It felt like breath, like remembering I had lungs. An hour later, Tessa responded. Short, polite, a little nervous. Hi, Eleanor. Thank you so much for the clarification. I'll coordinate with the print team right away and inform Lauren. Totally understandable. We appreciate everything you've done, truly. No smiley face this time, no pink signature. I closed the laptop, stood up, and let myself smile. Just a little. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I put on lipstick. A soft berry shade, subtle but unmissable, the same one I used to wear when I ran high-end events in Sonoma and had to walk into boardrooms with men who called me darlin', but never once offered me a chair. I wore it like armor then. And now, again. Downstairs, the wedding party was rehearsing for the ceremony. I could hear laughter through the ballroom doors, Travis's booming voice, Clarissa's tinkling giggle, the planner clapping her hands and saying, "Places, everyone." No one noticed me walk past, which was fine. They would. That evening, I received a call from Lauren. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't in the mood to be managed. A few minutes later, a text came through. "Mom, did you email Tessa?" Then another. "Can we talk before the rehearsal dinner? I just wasn't expecting this." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I had done nothing but ask for what was already mine. Later in the quiet of the room, I opened my Bible again, not for comfort, but for confirmation. It fell open, as it often does somewhere in Proverbs. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is good. Her lamp does not go out at night. I traced those words with my finger. She perceives that her merchandise is good, not proud, not arrogant, just aware. That's what this was not, revenge, not drama, awareness of what I gave, of what I am owed, and what I was no longer willing to let be taken silently. I didn't go to the rehearsal dinner. That morning, I'd received a printed itinerary slid under my hotel door, thick cardstock cursive font, gold foil edges. It listed all the events, all the key players, all the anticipated photo ops. My name wasn't on it. not even under special thanks, but Clarissa's was, listed as mother of the bride by heart. I read that phrase 3 times. Then I folded the card in half and placed it gently into the hotel trash bin. It didn't hurt the way it had before, because by then I had already spoken to my lawyer. Her name is Nadine. We'd worked together back in my Napa days when a vineyard owner tried to sue me for breach of contract after his son's wedding ran over budget. She's sharp, discreet, and most importantly, doesn't ask why an old woman is suddenly reviewing clauses and paper trails the day before her daughter's wedding. She signed the agreement Nadine asked over the phone. Yes, and you retained all funding receipts every cent, down to the gluten-free dessert samples. There was a pause on her end, then a quiet, satisfied exhale. You're well within your rights, Eleanor. I'll draw up a statement of acknowledgement. You can submit it formally or let it hang quietly over the event as a legal formality. Quietly, I said, but undeniably. She chuckled. My favorite kind. By noon, she'd emailed me a simple, elegant 2-page document titled Sponsorship Acknowledgement and Correction of Public Record, prepared by Whitman Legal Services, LLC. I didn't send it to Lauren, not yet. Some things don't need to be threats. They just need to be ready. That afternoon, I walked to the venue, not to check on things I wasn't invited to, but I walked because I needed to see the place one last time before it became someone else's story. The ballroom was being dressed in gold, literally. Gold chivari chairs, gold-rimmed water glasses, even gold-dusted macarons in little plastic domes. It all shimmered, opulent, curated, expensive. Lauren stood at the far end of the room, back to me, arms lifted, as the seamstress adjusted her rehearsal dress, a floor-length silk column with tiny pearl buttons trailing down the spine. She looked stunning. She looked untouched. Clarissa stood beside her holding a flute of Prosecco and offering commentary like it was her job. No Lauren tucked that strand. Softer. We don't want severe, we want ethereal. It took me a moment to realize this was the family she had rehearsed. Not chosen exactly, but styled. Clarissa fit the part better. She knew the language of yacht clubs and heritage donations. She understood how to lean just far enough into sentiment without risking mascara smudges. She belonged in the wedding album Lauren wanted to show people at art galleries and country clubs. I didn't. Not because I was lacking, but because I had already given too much to be beautiful in a photograph. Mothers who pay bills and sew hems and stay late after cleanup don't look good in soft focus. We wrinkle. We sweat. We stand crooked after a lifetime of leaning toward our children. But God sees that. I believe He does. And so I stood outside that room for exactly 1 minute longer. Then I turned and left without a word. Back at the hotel, I put the acknowledgement letter into a new envelope. I wrote Tessa's name on it and slipped it under her suite door. No drama, just documentation. I also left a note on the concierge desk. Please let Miss Lauren Whitman know I won't be attending the rehearsal dinner. I'm resting and preparing for the main event. Not a lie. Not even sarcasm. I was resting, and I was preparing, not to attend, but to be seen. The morning of the wedding, the sky was clear in that expensive California kind of way, like someone had ordered the light on purpose. I dressed slowly, not in anything flashy. Just a navy silk blouse, a pair of pearl earrings my husband gave me the year Lauren was born, and a pair of low-heeled shoes I could walk in without assistance. My hair was pulled back simple. My lipstick was the same shade as before. The envelope, the signed acknowledgement letter from Nadine, was in my purse just in case. I wasn't sure if I'd need it, but I liked knowing it was there. At the venue, I wasn't met with a warm hug or a corsage. No one ushered me to the bridal suite. The wedding coordinator glanced at me and said, "You're with catering." "No," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm with the bride." She blinked, then looked down at her clipboard. I walked past her. The ceremony was set up on a cliffside terrace overlooking the ocean. Rows of white chairs, a string quartet, playing something baroque and expensive. The air smelled like salt and roses. Guests began to arrive in clusters, women in blush-toned gowns, men in loafers with no socks. Conversations filled with words like portfolio Napa and legacy. I found my seat. Not in the first row, not even second. I sat in the fifth, where no one would ask questions, but no one could claim I wasn't there. From this angle, I could see the floral arch. I could see the aisle. I could see Clarissa in the front row dabbing her eyes delicately, her diamond bracelet catching the sun. And then the music shifted. Lauren appeared at the top of the aisle, radiant every bit the bride she had imagined. Her dress shimmered, her hair gleamed, and for one moment, just one, her eyes swept the crowd and landed on me. It lasted maybe a second, but she saw me. She saw me. She looked away quickly. But the damage or the repair had already begun. The ceremony proceeded. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped on fingers with trembling hands. There was applause, a kiss, the swell of music, and the roar of clapping that meant the performance had landed. Afterward, during the cocktail hour, I moved through the fringes like mist, not absent, not center stage, but present in every sense that mattered. When the MC began announcing the reception program, I stood quietly near the back. And of course, we want to thank those who made today possible, she said. Into the mic, smiling too broadly. A big round of applause for Travis's parents and Clarissa, who has been an absolute rock in this planning journey. Polite clapping, some cheers, no mention of me, but then a pause, a whisper, a quick conversation near the DJ booth, the planner. Tessa stepped up, her face flushed, and also a very special thank you to Ms. Eleanor Whitman, whose generous support made today's celebration possible. It was short, clumsy, but it was said. Heads turned. A few people clapped again. Some didn't know who I was. That was fine. Lauren looked toward me. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. That was enough. At dinner, I sat at a table near the exit. Not family, not vendor. Somewhere in between. They served truffle risotto and duck confit. The wine flowed like water. And I let myself breathe. No speeches came from me. No toasts. I wasn't asked. But the table card in front of me said, Ms. Eleanor Whitman event sponsor in small block font. Not mother, but not invisible. When dessert was served a millefeuille stacked with gold leaf, I slipped out quietly, walked along the stone path beside the terrace until I found a bench facing the ocean. I sat there in the breeze while laughter echoed behind me. I wasn't sad. Not anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't hoping for recognition beyond what was already mine. Because I had done the most radical thing a mother can do, I had told the truth out loud and survived. The Monday after the wedding, I returned home to Napa. No one noticed my departure, not officially. There were no hugs at the car curb, no thank you for everything, no leftover bouquet tucked into my suitcase. Just me, a carry-on with 2 dresses and a printed boarding pass with smudged ink. I sat by the plane window and watched California stretch out below me in squares of gold and green vineyards and valleys stitched together like a memory quilt. There was comfort in the land, in the honest shapes of things. By the time I got home, my hydrangeas had browned a little. The mailbox was stuffed with junk flyers and a retirement community newsletter I never subscribed to. My neighbor's cat was curled on my porch chair like it belonged there. I let it stay. I didn't unpack right away. I just stood in the kitchen, fingers resting on the counter, breathing in the familiar smell of lemon oil and old wood. This house wasn't curated. It wasn't designed for guests or photo spreads. But it was mine. Every inch, every dent in the floorboards, every scratch on the table from Lauren's 4th birthday when she insisted on using real scissors to open her gifts, every pan in the cupboard with a warped bottom, every mug that didn't match. This house remembered me. And that was more than I could say about San Diego. Later that evening, I poured a glass of Merlot, nothing fancy, just a $12 bottle from the corner market, and opened my laptop. Nadine had emailed me a follow-up. Subject line, post-event, transfer options. She had attached 2 documents. One was a proposed motion to convert the wedding sponsorship agreement into a formal financial gift with conditions, a clean legal way to affirm that the contribution was voluntary but not invisible. The other was a trust document, blank, unassigned, waiting to be filled with a new name. She had left a note. You don't have to give it to Lauren. You can give it forward. Your money, your legacy, your name stays either way. I stared at that line for a long time. Your name stays either way. How many times had I erased my name from the story? In invitations, in introductions, in programs, in holidays. How many times had I been someone's mom, or the one who helped, or that older woman in the navy dress I'd signed checks with no return address? Now for the first time, I could choose what happened next, not just to the money, but to the truth. The next morning, I walked to the local notary's office, the same one I used to file business licenses when I was planning weddings for wine families who never remembered to say thank you. This time, it was different. I asked to set up a legacy trust. Name of beneficiary, the clerk asked. Her name is Grace, I said. She's 10. He blinked. Your granddaughter. No, I said, and smiled. She's not mine. But she's watched me. Grace was my neighbor's kid. She brought me lemon bars every other Tuesday, asked questions no one else dared ask, like, why do your hands look like maps? And did you ever get married to God instead of a man? She was the only person who saw my dress after the wedding and said, you looked strong. Not pretty, not fancy, strong. She once told me she wanted to be someone who plans big things. I told her she already was. That evening, just before the sun dipped behind the hills, my phone rang. It was Lauren. For a long moment, I simply watched the screen light up. Her name still saved as my girl lowercase soft, the way I typed it once after she moved to New York. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Hi, Mom, she said, cautious. Hi. I didn't know if you'd pick up. I wasn't sure I would. A pause. Then, I just wanted to say, thank you. For everything. For the wedding. For helping. For being there. The words hung limp in the air, rehearsed polite, the kind of gratitude people offer out of obligation, not recognition. You're welcome, I said, then added, though I didn't do it to be thanked. Another pause. This one longer. I saw what Tessa added to the program, she said. The sponsor line. Yes. That wasn't, I didn't know she'd say it like that. But it was accurate, I said not unkindly. She said it right. Lauren was quiet again, and when she spoke, her voice was lower, less certain. Clarissa thought it was inappropriate. She would. I guess I didn't realize it mattered to you that much. And there it was. That little shard of glass in the middle of all the silk and sugar. I didn't realize it mattered to you. She thought I didn't mind being left out because I'd never demanded to be let in. She thought I was comfortable being invisible because I wore it so well. Lauren, I said gently, it mattered because it was mine. I know, she whispered. I think I know now. I didn't say too late. I didn't say finally. I just let the silence stretch, and eventually she filled it. Will you come down next month? Travis and I are hosting a wine night, just close friends and family. It'd be good to have you here. Really? I thought about the invitation. Thought about the house by the cliffs, the soft glassware, the chairs that never quite made space for me. And then I said, no, sweetheart, I won't. Not angry, just true. I'm taking some time for myself, I added, working on something new. Oh, she said, unsure. Okay, is it something big? I looked down at the sealed envelope on my kitchen counter, the one with Grace's name on it, ready to deliver. Yes, I said. It's something lasting. After we hung up, I poured another glass of wine and stepped out to the porch. The neighbor's cat jumped into my lap like it had always belonged there. I looked up at the stars just beginning to blink into view, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like someone's afterthought. I felt like myself, not a chapter in someone else's memoir, not a line item on a spreadsheet, not a support beam dressed in chiffon, just Eleanor Whitman, widow, builder, mother, witness. I raised my glass toward the sky, toward the great, wide, unknowable. To what stays, I whispered, and to what begins again. Inside, my phone buzzed once more, a message from Grace. Can I come over tomorrow and interview you for my Women Who Built Things project? I smiled. Yes, sweetheart, I replied. I'd like that. Then I turned off the lights and let the dark wrap around me, not as erasure, but as peace. Because some stories don't end with applause. They end with presence. And mine had just begun. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of someone you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to follow the channel. Your voice, your presence, they matter here. Always.